Hey everybody, this is Devin.
And Kate.
Here is Med Crimes.
Here it is.
I changed it up.
All right, I like it. Bam.
Hi, we're back.
We are right off the bat.
Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday.
Except for it's not Tuesday
It's
today.
not Tuesday, but you're
It's just
listening.
released on a Tuesday.
A lot of you are listening on a Tuesday, so
Most
thank you.
of you. We get a lot of good stuff on Tuesdays.
We sure do.
It's a good release day.
Happy late LNA week. I hope
Yes.
you all had a great LNA week.
We hope all of you had a great LNA week. Kate and I actually, LNA week hasn't happened yet in our mind because we've got a little stored up. Like, we've had a good schedule week, so we're busting them out.
We are. We're ahead of schedule, so we're
So
like...
it hasn't happened yet, but by the time you hear us, it'll have happened.
It sure
and I hope you had
will.
a good week.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I think we should mention, by the time you guys hear this, it will be a few weeks old, but obviously still just as devastating. But we're thinking about everybody in Texas.
Oh my gosh. That has just been the most heartbreaking situation. And it's all everybody. I mean, right now we're, like we said, a little behind, but it's all everybody is talking about and thinking about right now. It's all I can think about.
I don't often, my husband does a lot of the morning routine. David takes care of a lot of that. And I go to work early on a lot of days. But this morning I brought my kids to school and I just wanted extra hugs.
Well,
like,
so that's
I
exactly. That's the exact thing. I bring my kids to school. I put my daughter on a bus and I bring my son to school. And I mean, it so easily could have been their elementary
It's
school.
devastating. It's devastating.
And I can't. And my husband and I literally had a conversation last night about buying bulletproof backpacks for our kids.
No.
I shit you not. It's insane that we have to talk
Do those
about
exist?
this. Yes, they do. They've
Oh,
existed
come
for
on.
years.
Oh,
How sad
wow.
is that? Only in the United States. Yep.
Wow.
So we are so devastated for all of that that's going on.
I know we have some listeners in Texas.
We do. We have a lot of listeners in Texas,
right,
actually.
So we're thinking of everybody.
We are.
We
So-
have a new Patreon this week.
We sure do.
So we'd like to welcome Jennifer Knowles to the family.
Knowles. You're a powerful, fire-breathing dragon, and we love you.
Wow.
I know.
Kate and I were just saying that we have a fair amount of Jennifers.
Oh, yes, we do.
So we want to welcome any more Jennifers that would like to join us.
Any more Jennifers out there that are feeling like a generous Jennifer? Because I know.
Oh, that was really good.
We love
Thank you
it.
for being a generous Jennifer Knowles.
And all the other Jennifers.
All of you. Welcome to the family.
We love you all equally.
So this is part 2.
Part 2 of Robert Bierenbaum. And you guys, this guy's a jerk.
So, Kate, do you think you should just give us a brief synopsis?
I literally would love
I just
to.
said synopsis.
Synopsize.
Can you synopsize the first
I can-
episode for us?
I can summarize it. I
That
don't
would be
know if
great.
I can. Okay. So, Robert Bierenbaum is a plastic surgeon who grew up in West Orange, New Jersey. And he's a very, very smart guy. He doesn't do well socially, but he and...
kind of think we think he might be on the spectrum.
We do think he might be. And he and his wife, Gail, met and fell in love and had sort of a whirlwind romance and decided to sort of get married despite some tumultuous early love life. And we're now at the point where we're 3 years into the marriage. Robert has shown some abusive tendencies and he's been escalating. It's come out that he's, killed some animals or tried to kill some animals. He tried to strangle Gail's cat when he was mad at her.
So the whirlwind romance is starting to turn into turbulence.
Yes, it's very sour and very a not very good situation. She even confided in her therapist and in her friends and in her sister that he at one point had choked her into unconsciousness, and there was a police report filed at that time about that. And the therapist at the time actually strongly encouraged her to get out of that situation and had her sign a tear-us-off letter to cover his own ass and prove that he had urged her to do that because he was very nervous about her well-being. And Robert is calling around saying that he can't find his wife and that they had gotten
That's
into
right.
an argument.
Yep.
And that
And
his
the
wife
neighbor
had...
below heard noises.
Yes.
And then stopped hearing noises.
Exactly. And
Yep.
then never heard two voices again. So all of a sudden, Gail is nowhere to be found. And that's about where we stopped. So
Okay.
here we are.
Where's Gail?
I do want to point out the book that has helped me with a lot of my research. The book is called The Surgeon's Wife. It's by Kieran Crowley, and I highly recommend it. It's very, very clear that the author spent a lot of time interviewing family and friends because there's a lot of personal accounts and a lot of info in there with just conversations. And it's so helpful to really get a context of all this. And I wish I could just read the book to you over this podcast, but I can't. But if you want more details or if you need more details, please, I recommend it. The Surgeon's Wife, Kieran Crowley. So now Bob, the day after Gail goes missing and he calls Gail's mom, and Gail's mom comes to the apartment and notices, well, her purse is still here with her keys and her cigarettes. And she's not one that would just I mean, no matter where you're going,
where are you going to go without your keys?
Where are you going to go without your keys?
Right.
So, the following day, Bob has yet to make a police report or anything. So right now, Gail is still just missing.
And so all he's done is just call her mom.
Right. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And he's called a couple other friends and other acquaintances too. Have you heard from Gail? Have you seen Gail? And at every time he talks to someone, he takes the opportunity to tell them, oh, we had this huge fight. And she said something about killing herself. And now I'm really concerned about her well-being.
You know what
he's
this is
making
giving
sure
me?
to share that with
this
everybody.
Is giving me vibes of the Scott and Lacey Peterson.
Oh,
Remember
totally.
that? That's what this is giving me vibes about.
100%.
Yeah.
That's so funny you said that because I thought the same thing when I was reading for part 1. I was like, this is really Scott and Lacey Peterson territory here. Now, the same day that Bob goes to work, now this is the following day. So Bob goes to work the following day and he kind of leaves in a huff midday, making sure that his department and his coworkers know that he's leaving to go look for his wife because his wife had gone missing last night and she's not back. And I just feel like I need to go look for her. So fine. And he calls Beth Israel Medical Center. Now, we're familiar with the one in Boston because we are closer to Boston, but there is a
New Englanders.
Beth Israel. Yep, there is a Beth Israel system in New York as well. Now, he calls them because Gail was doing an internship and clinical rotation there for her psychology degree. Okay. And she was due to see patients in the clinic that day. So he called her preceptor and said, hey, have you seen Gail? And the preceptor said, no, actually, she hasn't shown up. And she always, calls and she never misses clinical. We've all been in nursing and graduate school. You don't miss your clinical time. You can't because it's hard to make up. You can, and I don't know what it was like back then, but that's
Remember
how it is
our
now.
old roomie who just wouldn't get up for clinical?
Yeah, I do.
If you're listening,
Girlfriend,
you know who you are. We
love
miss you. And you were just... You were fun.
You were so fun. So fun. It's a great way to put it. So, now he asked her hey, is Gail there? And she said, no, she never misses clinical. She's always on time. And Bob, again, of course, tells the clinical instructor that whole, sob story about the argument that they had. And she was, quote, gone in a huff and that he worries that she might hurt herself. So
he's really laying the groundwork.
He is really laying it on so thick. Mm-hmm. So that same night, so this is Monday night that this occurs, okay? Because she's due to be in clinical Monday morning. Now, that same night, finally, at 9 p.m. Monday night, this is 2 days after she's disappeared, he drives down to the 19th precinct of the NYPD where he reports his wife missing. So a report had finally been filed. He gave this whole story about he and Gail were fighting over a period of several days, but that it really escalated that day. She said something to the effect that, she wants to end it all and that she might hurt herself. And he's very worried about her well-being. And of course, he brings up her past, about the drug use in the past, the alcoholism in the past, which, I mean, she did do some drinking now still. The drug use, as far as I know, is remote for the most part. Mm-hmm. I did read that she occasionally would mix a Quaalude or Quaalude, remember back in the day, Quaaludes, they were those sedative pills?
No.
It's what Bill Cosby used on his
Oh.
victims. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They're a prescription sleeping pill sedative anti-anxiety thing.
I am so
from back in the day.
naive in the drug category.
Oh God, me too. But
Which is
these
wonderful.
these aren't even really around anymore. I don't think these were very old school
Got it.
medication. So she did occasionally use those and mix them with alcohol. So that was sort of an ongoing issue, but she didn't have any other illicit drug use that we knew of. And her depression and anxiety, I mean, she was seeing a therapist, and it was an ongoing issue, but it was well controlled that we know of. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, the police are like out canvassing the neighborhood looking for her, and her family is contributing, like all canvassing out looking for her, and Bob is also out canvassing and looking for her. So he's very, very active and trying to really, like, anybody who would listen, he'll tell the story. So any stranger that stops to talk to him about it, like, he's going to tell them the whole story just to, like, really lay it on thick. Now, he's, like, knocking on doors of neighbors and, like, all in his apartment complex, knocking on all those doors, making sure that they know that Gail is missing. And he was really initially very proactive in the investigation and being very, like, helpful. So Bob had missing persons posters made up that all of his friends and family helped distribute and hang up all over Manhattan, and it promised a reward for information leading to finding Gail. And Bob, again, being very, very active in the investigation, he was devoting all of his time and energy when he's not at work, because he is still needing to go to work.
Really looking like the devastating husband.
He really is trying here to look
Scott Peterson.
like he's devastated. Exactly. Scott Peterson. So he's like following up on leads, making phone calls, like he's doing all the devastated husband stuff. Like he's really trying here. Now Elaine, Gail's sister, had her suspicions because, remember, Gail had told Elaine that day that she disappeared, I can't stand it anymore. I'm going to tell Bob today that I'm leaving him.
Okay.
So she immediately was like, so wait a minute. My sister goes to tell Bob that it's over because he's too violent and dangerous. And all of a sudden she's gone. So
because if she had legit had the conversation to leave him, she might be with her.
Well,
right?
exactly.
Or with her mother.
Or she
one of
probably
them.
would have at least heard from Gail.
Right.
Because the two were very close.
Yeah.
So she had her suspicions.
Yep.
Now, her, like, she had known, I mean, she knew about the cat strangling. She knew about the other relationship with the cat strangling. She knew that he had strangled her into an unconsciousness. Like, she knew all of that. So she was really initially very, like, suspicious of this whole situation. But Gail had made her promise when they were talking early on to, like, keep all of this information about Bob a secret from my parents. Because she was very much seeking her parents' approval, as she had her whole life, and did not want to, you know, make her, like, cast Bob in a bad light and worry
I get
her
it.
parents.
I've been there.
You know?
Yeah.
So, exactly. So Elaine decided to finally, you know, the situation now is that Gail is missing and that she's very suspicious of Bob. So she decided to open up to her parents about all of that Gail had told her, because she felt like it was relevant in the situation. And so she did. And now, of course, the parents are immediately like, what the fuck? Are you serious? Like, obviously Bob did something to her. Now, Gail and Elaine's parents immediately, now that they're suspicions are like amplified hearing this, because they had known nothing prior to this about the abuse, about the cats, about the episode with the strangling. They knew nothing. So they started.
God, they must have been freaking.
Can you imagine? So they didn't want to like let Bob in on this right away,
right? Because
though.
they probably want to pick up on any subtle hints or behaviors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they didn't want to let him in on this, right? And they just wanted to kind of like still be allowed into his life and into his apartment, and so that they could do some like snooping and looking around. And they started looking, you know, in the garbage chute. They started snooping around his building. They're convinced that Gail is gone and that he did something to her.
Right.
So they start like sort of collecting evidence and trying to really like sort of on the sly, you know, figure out what's going on. And they looked in dumpsters. They looked anywhere that he could have possibly.
That's so petrifying.
Can you
as a
imagine
parent.
going through that,
gosh.
looking through dumpsters for your dead daughter? That is insane. So, given that they had, you know, no witnesses, no leads, on the side of the police, they made a plan to alert the media to enlist their help in trying to find out if anybody had seen her alive and, you know, if anybody had seen her at all. So they do this press conference, and Bob was very cooperative, and he actually was interviewed by a local news station where he made a plea stating, quote, "I am concerned about her safety. This is totally out of character for her. I'm really worried. She has an appointment to see patients on Monday at Beth Israel to do some data research and to see patients, but she missed those appointments. I think no matter what, she would never abandon her patients," end quote. Which, I mean, it's a nice sentence. I'm sure she probably would not have ever missed that. You know what I mean?
So what did you do to her to make her miss her
Exactly.
patients?
So what did you do to her? Yeah, exactly. Now, headlines started busting out, you know, quote, "surgeon's wife vanishes," and the like, you know, because, you know, it's all about him.
Right.
And they described their, you know, quote, 3-year childless marriage as rocky. And, you know, because he was admitting that they were fighting and that they were, and that she had some substance abuse issues in the past and ongoing alcoholism. So it was kind of mostly painting her in really a bad light.
Not cool, dude.
No, really uncool.
Not cool.
So meanwhile, the Katz family, Gail's family, had gone to the detectives.
I started just thinking about the strangled cats.
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
like,
no,
why are we
not-
talking about
no.
the family of cats?
The Katz.
Yeah, okay, get it.
You know what? When I said that, I was like, I wonder if she thinks I'm talking about, if I'm talking about the
I
strangled
was.
cats. Spoiler alert, Devin was thinking about the strangled cats. I love it.
Okay, so Gail's last name is Katz.
Yes, Gail's
Her family's last
unmarried.
name.
Her maiden
Yeah,
name is
got
Katz.
it.
Now, they had gone to the detectives with the information of, you know, you need to look into this past police report of when she was strangled into unconsciousness. Gail confided in us about his rage tendencies and how he would be perfectly fine. And then it was like a switch flipped and he would fly into a rage. And they talked about the cats. They talked about, you know, all of that to the detectives. And immediately they were like, I mean, we were a little suspicious of Bob too, because you always look at the spouse. But now this is like really fueling the fire. So
Isn't that awful?
I know.
You always look at the spouse.
but you do, because
I know
9
you
times
have
out
to.
of 10,
And
statistically speaking, it is
That's just
most
awful.
likely the spouse.
and
in
then
these
you have a
situations.
spouse who's actually distraught because they weren't a part of whatever has happened.
Oh, I know. And they just
You know what I
get,
mean?
they
and
get
then everyone
railroaded.
starts to wonder, is that real? Is
Yeah,
it not real?
exactly.
Are you playing?
It's
You
very
know?
sad.
Oh, what a world we live in.
I know. It's very sad. Now, the lead detective on the case was Tom O'Malley. And he went to Bob's apartment and kind of took a look around. He did have a team come in to look at the apartment forensically and see if they could find any blood, like in the drains, specifically in the bathtub, or, you know, in the cracks of the floor or anywhere else. They found nothing. So the lead detective then, Tom, started looking a little harder at him, and they started to really interview him and ask him to repeat his story, you know, with, like they do. But they notice that he's really vague with the timeline of things. And anytime he's asked about,
that's
very suspicious. So anytime he's asked about like the approximate timing of events, like, well, when did you start fighting this day? When did she come home? When do you think she walked out the door? It was always, I don't really know. I can't really recall. And he would never remember like the duration of events either. Like, how long did you fight? I don't really know. Like, you can't even give it like a minute, an hour. Like you can't even.
I'm sure if you were just saying your statement right away, then you're just like, you know, it's general. But when they're grilling you on specific details, like, those are things that you just remember. Was it 10 minutes, 15 minutes?
Well, that's
you
the
know?
thing. If
Or
it
like,
actually happened, you should be able to approximate
when you're thinking
a
about
time.
those details. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's where things get a little sus. Now, they questioned that if he was worried about her safety, then why wait from when she disappeared on a Saturday night to a Monday night to report her missing?
Right.
So that's
48 hours.
48 full hours. And he said, well, you know, I was pretty convinced that she was going to return. I thought maybe she would return. Like, but you were worried about her safety, so that doesn't really make sense.
If you thought she was just mad, then maybe you thought she'd return.
Right.
But safety.
If
call
you're
right
worried
away.
about her safety, then why would you wait? Now, the detectives asked if he had ever strangled a cat in his life. And he was like, no. And they asked, have you ever gotten physical with Gail? He said, no. No,
Liar.
never. Lies. All lies. So the cat thing was hearsay, you know. They did have a police report from Gail about the time that Bob had strangled her, but I guess there was really no physical evidence of it because they didn't really have that to go on other than like a police report from Gail. So detectives,
For those that can't see, I just did an eye roll.
I know she did roll. It was really I could hear it in the microphone. So the detectives then asked if he knew anybody by the name of Ken or Anthony, which were her lovers. Remember, she was having affairs.
Yeah, I'm like, wait, who were they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Bob said immediately, he said yes. And
Okay.
they said, well, how do you know them? And Bob said, well, those names are in her address book. Which,
He
like,
didn't just come out and say
what?
they were sleeping with my wife.
I know, he just didn't want to say that because he didn't want to make
Give
it
motive.
look away. Exactly. So, Tom, knew, like, even just after, like, these further interviews, he's like, this guy definitely did it. He's like, I just need the evidence. I need a body and I need the evidence. So he had to be really careful, though, because if he gets too aggressive with his questioning or gives Bob the idea that he's really getting suspicious, then Bob's just going to stop talking and lawyer up. And he didn't want that. He wanted him to still engage
and communicate.
Exactly. So Bob starts talking more and more with her family and friends about Gail's past and starts making statements like, well, she's been more and more depressed lately. She's been working on all these big papers. It's really making her stressed out. And you remember she tried to kill herself that one time, right? And like just really like painting her in this way that is
of like just a giant story of mental illness.
exactly
right?
like it
that's
was all
she
Gail,
was.
and she was manipulative and she was a substance abuser and she did this to herself and like just really like trying to drive that home. And he even like pointed out, well, maybe she got mixed up in some bad business with her drug dealers and maybe her drug dealers just like kidnapped her, which like
come on,
Bob, like, sit down, sir. You're ridiculous.
Yeah.
This
Take
is
a
ridiculous, sir. Take lots of seats.
Sit in the back.
Yeah, you go sit in the back. Oh, go that way. He's obviously trying to really, like, over-control this narrative. And Gail's friends and family were getting more and more pissed about this because they knew that Bob had done something to her. And they actually confronted Bob at one point. And they asked him, okay, if she did leave, then why did none of the doormen of the apartment building see her leave on Saturday night or Sunday morning? Nobody saw her leave this building. And also,
what years were this again?
85.
So did they have cameras in 85 also?
Great question. I don't think so because I didn't find any mention of any CCTV or cameras.
Okay.
So, and also they asked, Bob, didn't you used to have an area rug in the living room for like years and years?
Oh.
What happened to the area rug, Bob?
Stop.
So Bob said, the cat peed on it and I'm getting it cleaned.
Liar.
So many red flags. So many lies.
I thought he strangled the cat. He has another one?
There's another cat, apparently, because she had gotten rid of the cat. And there's
so
a new
many
cat.
cats.
There's cats everywhere.
There's so many cats.
Don't fuck with cats. You got to watch it on Netflix. It's the best. So Bob, again, he claimed that the cat peed on it and he's having the rug cleaned. Now, as the detectives are pressing Bob sort of gently about what arguments they had, he starts like clamming up a little bit and he would never want to go into the details. Now, they're trying to say like, okay, well, then tell me again what you and Gail were fighting about. He'd say, I don't want to talk about it. It's none of your business. I don't want to talk about what I fought about.
Your wife's
it's
missing.
like, well, if you really wanted to help and find your wife, then yeah, you do need to tell us.
Speak up, dude.
We need to know. So, but he wouldn't. He would just clam up. So
whatever.
Now I think Bob is like starting to sense that people are looking at him more because he's getting it from the family, and now the cops are keep wanting to talk to him to clarify stuff, and he's starting to.
Bob's a boob.
Yeah, Bob the boob. That's what he is. So, as they kept pressing him, he would just say, "I'd rather not discuss it. It's none of your business." So, what Bob failed to mention...
Basically, when your wife is missing, everything is their business.
Well, that's the thing. You have to be an open book. You have to be. So, now, what Bob failed to mention altogether was that he had gone flying on Saturday night.
Stop. How'd they find this out?
No one looked into this until later on, and we're going to get into like what transpired.
Like weeks later?
Yeah. No, like years later. Yeah.
Years?
Yeah. So
What?
this is
Stop.
where the investigation like stalled.
Right. They don't have anything.
There was no evidence. There was no body. There was nothing physical. Police knew that Bob did something, but there was just
Like,
no evidence.
You can't find her.
They couldn't do anything with it. So
They knew he was a pilot, right? Nobody
yeah.
thought about the plane stuff until years later.
nope.
Come on.
I know, that surprised me too. I was like,
That is
nobody looked
surprising.
into this. So now this is where Bob makes the decision to move from Manhattan because he's like, things are just too chaotic here. And,
Right.
You know, now
Everybody
this is the
knows.
following year. This is 1986 when he decides to move. So he moves and resettles to Reno, Nevada.
Her poor family.
I know. Can you imagine? Like, Bob just gets to go on living and they're like grieving their missing loved one and they have no closure. They think they know what happened.
And he just takes off.
And he just takes off to do whatever. And there's nothing that police can do about it. So on May 21st, 1989, so this is about 4 years after her disappearance, just before 10 a.m., Staten Island police were notified that a pale object was found in the water between Piers 1 and 3, and it turned out to be a human torso. Now,
What?
believe it or not, finding bodies in the water around springtime was not very unusual in this area. And it continues to not
Got
be.
another one, folks.
Apparently it's just like a thing, and it's like a rite of spring in New York that like with the thaw comes a few bodies down the river.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Sure. I mean, it's spring right
Is
now.
this true, New Yorkers? I really just want to know. Because, I mean, there are people that like slip and fall off bridges, go missing, and there are people that die by suicide, you know, by
Right.
jumping, and like they're not found until the thaw, which is really disturbing to think about, but it is a fact, I guess, of New York.
Why did I never know about this?
I don't know. I didn't know about it until just
Okay.
now. Apparently it's not unusual. So finding a torso though with like severed limbs is unusual
it's
because
not a whole
that's
body.
That's
It's not someone that
obviously
jumped in a
that's foul
bridge.
play. So the torso was examined in autopsy, and unfortunately the tissues were so degraded that the new DNA testing available, I mean it was literally just coming out,
Right.
was not sensitive enough to be performed on that tissue at the time. So Gail's family, though, given the timeline, was convinced that this torso was their sister. It couldn't be proven, but the ME at the time, based on some x-rays, told them that, you know, it matches her description physically and her size, and this could be Gail, is what they
Okay.
told her. So
They're not ruling out that
they're
it's
not ruling it out, but they
Not
could not prove
confirming.
it at the time. So they actually ended up burying this torso as Gail's remains. And they had a funeral and they buried it and like marked the grave as Gail. So they
Imagine if it wasn't her though, and they went through that.
stay tuned.
Oh my God!
Devin's face is the best. I love it so much. Okay. Now, Bob, meanwhile, is opening a medical practice in Reno that like flourishes. And by all accounts, like he sort of went there, he made new friends, he dated a couple of people that didn't work out, and then he met and married.
Did they have any cats?
I don't know, maybe.
Curious.
Now, he met and married his new wife, Dr.
Oh.
Janet Bierenbaum, who later said that he was nothing but a perfectly loving, caring, sweet husband, and he was never, ever violent with her. So, by all accounts, I mean, he's doing great. His whole circle of friends said that he was, like, super charitable. He donated a lot, and he actually, on his own dime, would fly from Reno to areas of Mexico and repair cleft lips and palates for children who could not afford that.
He's going above and beyond to make himself look good.
That's what I think. I think he's
way over the top.
I think he's.
I mean, that's gracious.
It is, and I think he did do a lot of good in this period of his life, which is great. But it doesn't undo what you did, dude. Sorry, my dude. So, meanwhile, he's just like doing great things and, has these great friends and this beautiful wife, and they're starting to plan their family, and they're actually having kids, he and his wife Janet. And meanwhile, Gail's family is still like, we're not giving up on this.
Right.
Because we still don't know. We still need to prove that this, torso is
You're not just walking away and starting a new life after what you did.
Exactly. And obviously she got in the river somehow. So now friends of Bob's just assumed that after hearing about Gail's disappearance that he had sort of just like fallen victim to, having the misfortune of marrying this troubled woman, and that they saw no evidence that he was like dangerous with them. So they kind of just chalked it all up to, well, she must have been a psycho. And she took off, obviously.
Blaming the
poor
victim.
Bob. Yeah, exactly. So that's sort of how he painted himself there. Now, meanwhile, Gail's family's still making efforts to figure out what the hell happened. And they're coming up empty-handed, unfortunately. So her family starts going to the media, and her sister Elaine starts writing letters to local and national papers, pointing out their abusive past and essentially casting more suspicion and more light onto Bob. And they are badasses because they did not let this fucking die.
Awesome.
And they just kept going, and they just kept hammering it on.
How many stories have we done now where it has to be the family that's pushing and pushing and pushing and not letting it go?
Yes, exactly right. Yeah. Way too many, I think. Way too many. So she's holding nothing back. Like, she talked about the cats. She talked about how he was violent with Gail. She talked about how he once strangled her into unconsciousness. She, like, published the police report that Gail had provided that time when she was strangled by Bob, and how he was like still just like living his life in this new place with his new family and enjoying the shit out of life when it was obvious that he had killed Gail or done something with her. So Gail's family made sure to torment the shit out of Bob. Gail's mom and sister got his phone number somehow, and they started leaving voicemails on his phone. It's exactly what they did.
You will never get away with this.
And
oh my God, I love this.
I love this so much. I know, because he described that he would like begrudgingly push the button on his answering machine, and again it would be a voicemail from Gail's mom going, "Murderer!" And it was, they did this like multiple times a week, and just did not let the man like live in peace, which is amazing. So eventually, I know what you did. I know what you did, you jerk. So that's literally what they did. And so he would have to like play his messages and get
and I hope the wife heard everything.
Oh yeah, she did. Yep. So so the family finally is like, that's it. We have to hire a private investigator. So this PI comes on, and he starts barking up all sorts of trees and checking every single lead, every single detail of every single thing, which is what they do. So eventually it was the private investigator that thought to himself, I wonder if Bob flew around any of this time, because there's been no trace of a body, and that's a thing that he can do. So he went to this.
I'm so pissed that it took a private investigator.
I know, isn't that insane? So eventually he takes a ride over to the Hamptons, which is where this plane rental company was out of, that Bob often would rent a plane from when he was doing his little like excursions or whatnot. And he asked for the flight logs for that day, and he found he found a flight log that looked like it had been altered. And what it said was that he had flown on the evening of July 8th. So it looked like it had been altered, though, because when he looked back at the official records, that he had actually flown on the evening of July 7th. And that Bob had scribbled out the date and changed it to the 8th, which is dumb because, first of all, it's equally suspicious whether you fly on the evening that your
Saturday
wife disappears or
Sunday.
Sunday.
The next night.
Exactly.
Either night, what are you doing on a plane?
But what's more suspicious now is that you fucking changed that to reflect a different day.
Yes.
So with this new information, the PI shares it with the police, and this totally reignited the entire investigation, because they were like, hold on. Why the fuck did he not tell us that he rented a plane and flew the night that his wife disappeared? And why did he try to change the logs to reflect that he flew the following day? Which, again, is dumb.
Right.
So now this, like, really kind of blew things up. Now, police
Going down, Bob.
I know. So these detectives that were following this case, they pick up the phone. The police officers actually pick up the phone just to test something. And they called Bob out of the blue in North Dakota. And they said to him, hey, Bob, we found your wife. We found Gail. We found her. And Bob's reaction was very unusual. And this is exactly what they were looking for. And what he said was, there was like a silence for like 30 seconds. And he said, I doubt it's Gail. They didn't find Gail. How the fuck do you know, sir? So that's unusual. So,
like, how do you know?
Police then flew to North Dakota to interview Bob. And with the information that Bob took a flight the day that his wife disappeared and altered the flight logs, authorities now had enough circumstantial evidence they found to move forward with an arrest.
Oh.
And Bob's lawyer calls Bob and notifies them, hey, you know,
even though they don't have confirmation of a
even
of
though
a body
they don't have body, and this is very, very rare that they can even charge people without any physical evidence. It's very unusual. And so prosecutors knew that they had a big challenge ahead of them, because let alone being able to get an arrest warrant is a challenge, but being able to get a conviction would be next to impossible. And it's very, very few and far between that this has actually happened and they've gotten a conviction without a body or any physical evidence. So they knew that this would be a challenge. But so Bob's lawyer calls Bob and says, hey, listen, and calls him in Nevada and says, hey, listen, you've been indicted on these charges and they need you to get here within the next two days to turn yourself in. So they did. And this was in December of 1999 when this has all come about.
Almost. Wow. This is 14 years.
When he's exactly 14 years and he's finally arrested.
Wow.
So he was charged with first-degree murder, and he faced a sentence of life in prison. Now,
first-degree murder without a body. Interesting.
So, of note, around this time, because the investigation had reignited, they decided to exhume the torso to do DNA testing, because at this time it was, you know,
more
it had
advanced.
been 10 more years and DNA testing was a lot more advanced and a lot more sensitive. So they were able to get a DNA profile off the torso, and unfortunately it did not match Gail.
See, I said that. Wow.
I know you asked. I know.
They had a funeral for a torso that wasn't Gail.
So the tiny bit of closure that they thought they had was just gone, and they still had no body, had no real idea at this point what happened to Gail. So
who was that person?
We don't know. We don't know.
Who else had all their limbs severed and their torso?
I don't know.
Put
I
into
want to
the
know.
ocean?
Let's do a whole separate episode about that torso, because I don't
Who
know
are
who
you,
it was.
torso man?
Who are you, lady? Torso lady.
Oh, torso lady.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah. Who are you, torso lady? So he was offered a plea deal, which he turned down, and he continued to vehemently deny that he had anything to do with his wife's disappearance.
Right, because he's like, sweet, that just got me,
Yes,
you know?
exactly. So Manhattan prosecutors alleged that Bob had killed Gail, brought her to the airport, rented a plane that same night, packaged her body somehow, possibly in like a duffel bag or something.
Or an area rug.
And flew over the Atlantic Ocean, where he dumped her body into the ocean. So this case was highly, highly publicized and garnered a lot of media attention. His wife, Janet, did stand by his side. but later reported feeling very humiliated. And this whole situation even like pushed her to leave her job, like leave medicine altogether.
Oh.
And so she's now an attorney, actually. She went to law school and she's written a couple of books.
So she was like obviously not on his side.
Yeah.
Good.
So the big thing is that she had literally just had their second child.
Oh.
Like she had very, very small children at the time and was like, what the hell am I supposed to do? You know what I mean? So that was a really, really tough situation for her to be in. She did buy into the narrative that Gail was really manipulative and unstable and chronically suicidal.
So she saw something.
Mm-hmm. So
she had probably some experiences.
Probably. I would imagine
even if they
so.
were mild.
Yep. So the trial begins. Prosecution calls Michael Stone, who was Gail's psychiatrist that had her sign the Tarasoff letter. Now, he testified to all the disturbing things that Gail had said about Bob, the things that he had done, and also specifically the pattern of escalation that he had sort of identified in Bob's behaviors, you know, being that he was raging and then he started strangling cats and then he strangled Gail into unconsciousness and now all of a sudden Gail is gone. And the likelihood that, you know, Bob had something to do with it. So the prosecutors also argued that she would not have died by suicide at this time in her life, as there was evidence that she was looking forward to a future without him. You know, she had gone to people and said, I'm leaving Bob. I'm in school. I'm almost done with my clinical psychology degree. I'm going to be independent. Like there were all these things, like she was actively working on projects for school. It just did not fit. It did not make sense that at this point in her life, Gail would do that. So, prosecution also said in their closing arguments that, quote, the marriage was terminated that night, not by divorce, but at the hands of the defendant when he killed his wife in the apartment, removed her body, took his father's Cadillac to an airport in New Jersey where he had it packaged possibly in a duffel bag, where he rented a Cessna 172 for approximately 2 hours in the areas he had access, the depths of the ocean extending from Montauk Point to Cape May in New Jersey. He dumped her body into the ocean where it remains to this day. It was her intention to leave her husband on that day, not to drop off the face of the earth, end quote. So, now the defense did have a witness to present, which they sort of put all of their eggs into this guy's basket. So this guy's name is Joel Davis, and he was someone who worked at a bagel shop near their apartment complex, and he swore he saw Gail there the following morning, the Sunday morning after she was supposedly disappeared.
Really?
But apparently he told police this, and he was able to pick Gail's photo out of a lineup to identify her as the woman that he saw. So this was like a big, strong thing that, that the defense had.
Thinking they had an ID witness.
Yep. And then in their closing arguments, they again reiterated that the absence of a body or any physical evidence, you know, was making it really difficult. It should make it really difficult for anybody to believe that Bob had anything to do with this. So the circumstantial evidence, however, did prove too overwhelming. And in February of 2000, Robert Bierenbaum was convicted of first-degree murder of his wife, Gail Katz, on circumstantial evidence alone.
That's amazing.
I know. And he was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. No body has ever been found. Oh. Isn't that incredibly sad?
Wow.
So actually recently in 2020, he was eligible for parole because it had been his 20 years, his first 20 years. Now, he was in the media again because after maintaining his innocence throughout all of this, he confessed. He confessed to killing Gail. He made a statement to the parole board that shocked everyone, and he said, quote, I just wanted her to stop yelling at me, and I attacked her, end quote. And then he goes on to admit to strangling his wife, taking her body out of the apartment in a duffel bag into the rented aircraft and throwing her out of the plane while flying over the Atlantic Ocean.
Oh my God.
This like literally shocked everyone. And the prosecutors from 20 years ago were interviewed for like this big 2020 piece that they did.
Is he just like, I got nothing else to lose at this point? So he's I did that.
Yeah. And I think that it bodes well for people when they're in front of the parole board to take responsibility for what they did.
I did that.
So I think he thought that maybe it would increase his chances of getting out. But no, it did not do that.
Okay.
So all the prosecutors were like all convinced that he would just never take responsibility for any of his actions, and we're all very shocked that happened. So his parole was denied, and he remains incarcerated at Ossining Correctional Facility in New York to this day. And I think he's eligible to reapply for parole in the future, but I'm not sure when.
Wow.
I know.
What's the name of the town that he's in?
I don't know what the town is, but it's Ossining Correctional Facility in New York State. Yeah, you should look it up. And that is the story of Robert Bierenbaum.
I hope so. Now he's been sitting there so he's probably thinking it's 2020, like there's this pandemic and it's going through prisons. I'm going to confess and let me out.
Yep.
No. You sitting there.
Sorry, you sitting there. You get
you
COVID.
catch COVID.
Yeah. You get to have COVID. So,
wow.
You know, our hearts are with Gail's family. Because that just really sucks.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can believe it. It's in the ocean. That's
it is.
Very challenging to try and find a body.
That they're never going to have any remains of Gail to lay to rest. But, I mean, I know it took 20 years, but at least he did finally own up to it. So they have some element of closure. At least if it were my loved one, I would say, yeah, you fucking did.
That's
Thanks
Sing
for
Sing.
finally fucking saying it. Oh, it is?
He's in Sing Sing.
Oh, he's in Sing Sing. That's weird. I wonder why they said Ossining Correction Facility.
So that's the town.
Oh.
Sing Sing Correctional Facility in Ossining, New York.
He is in Sing Sing. That is where he is.
That reminds me of like the mob or something.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. I just had to know for my own curiosity.
Well, for Devin's own curiosity, she now knows.
You can sit and Sing Sing, Bob, you boob.
Right. You can, Bob the boob.
Well, thank you once again for listening.
This was a good one.
Check us out on Instagram at MedCrimes Podcast.
Send us a Twitter at MedCrimesPC.
Whoa.
I know that was jarring.
That was angry.
I didn't say Twitter. I wanted to change it up.
I was angry.
I'm sorry.
Search us on Facebook for MedCrimes Podcast.
If you wish to become a Patreon, please visit www.patreon.com/MedCrimesPodcast.
Got a crazy story? Anything?
Is it hilarious? Is
Creepy?
it spooky?
Fucked up?
Is it insane?
Send it. We want to know.
We want to know what you've been through. Stay safe, y'all.
Toodles.
Bye.